They say every bloodline carries secrets. But what happens when you're the last one left to carry them? In the frozen wastes beyond the Ashmark Mountains, where even the wind forgets to howl, there lived an orc who had outlived his entire clan. His name was Thrakmar the Enduring, though he hadn't felt worthy of that title in decades. This is the story of the last son of the Blackfang Clan. A warrior who carried a burden he never asked for. A secret so terrible, so magnificent, that it had been passed down through whispered words from chieftain to heir for 3,000 years. And now, with no one left to pass it to, Thrakmar would have to decide, should some secrets die with the last keeper, or was he meant to break a cycle that should have ended long ago? Thrakmar's hands trembled as he stirred the fire in his solitary cave. Not from cold, orcs of the Blackfang bloodline were bred for ice and darkness. No, his hands shook from something far more insidious. Loneliness. And the weight of knowledge that was slowly crushing him from the inside out. He was 63 winters old. For an orc, this was the prime of life, the years when warriors reached their peak strength and wisdom. But Thrakmar felt ancient. His tusks, which should have gleamed white and fierce, were yellowed and chipped. His skin, once the proud deep green of mountain moss, had faded to the color of old leather. He was the last. The very last. The Blackfang clan had once been 500 strong. Warriors feared across 7 kingdoms. Hunters who could track a snow hare across frozen granite. Shamans who spoke to the spirits dwelling in the glacial depths. They had been proud. They had been mighty. And they had carried a secret that made them targets. Thrakmar rose from his fire and walked to the back of his cave, where the ice grew thick against the stone. With one clawed finger, he traced the names carved there. His father, Thrakmar the Wise. His mother, Neshra of the Frozen Heart. His 3 brothers. His sister. His uncles and aunts. 47 cousins. Every member of his clan, their names preserved in the eternal ice. All dead. The purge had come 20 years ago. The human kingdoms, united for once in their fear, had sent their armies. Not to conquer orc lands, they never wanted these frozen wastes. No, they came specifically for the Blackfang clan. They came because rumors had spread. Whispers of what the Blackfang orcs protected. What they knew. Thrakmar had been away that day, hunting in the deep valleys. When he returned, the massacre was 3 days old. The bodies had already frozen in the snow, preserved like grotesque sculptures. His father's body lay across the threshold of their great hall, his final act one of defiance, dying while trying to protect the clan's sacred chamber. But the humans hadn't found it. They had slaughtered every orc they could find, burned the settlement to ash, and left believing their mission complete. They never discovered the real secret. Because the Blackfang clan's greatest treasure wasn't hidden in any chamber. It wasn't written in any book or sealed in any vault. It was passed mind to mind, soul to soul, from dying chieftain to living heir. A secret so profound that it could only be transferred through what the orcs called the Bloodwhisper. A ritual that connected 2 minds completely, allowing memories and knowledge to flow like water between vessels. Thrakmar's father had been dying when he returned. Bleeding out from a dozen sword wounds, he had just enough strength left to grasp his son's hand and initiate the Bloodwhisper. In 30 excruciating seconds, 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge slammed into Thrakmar's mind. And nothing had been the same since. What was the secret? What knowledge was worth 3,000 years of silence, worth the extinction of an entire clan? It was this: the orcs came first. Not the elves with their ancient forests and crystal spires. Not the dwarfs with their mountain halls and forges of legend. Not even the dragons with their primordial power. The orcs. Orcish civilization had existed when the world was young, when the continents were still being shaped by the last throes of creation. They had built cities of stone and song. They had mastered magics that made modern wizardry look like children playing with candle flames. They had been philosophers, artists, healers, and yes, warriors. And then came the Sundering. A cataclysm so complete, so devastating, that it erased 99% of orcish civilization from existence. The great cities crumbled. The magical academies burned. The libraries turned to ash. The only orcs who survived were those in the remotest regions, the frozen wastes, the deepest caves, the most desolate deserts. They survived, but they were changed. Cut off from their culture, from their learning, from everything that made them more than savage tribes, they regressed. Within 3 generations, the orcs had forgotten they had ever been anything but barbarians. All except one small group. One clan who had been the record keepers, the historians of the old world. The Blackfang Clan had maintained an oral tradition, passing down the true history through the Bloodwhisper. Generation after generation, chieftain to heir, the knowledge survived. And with it came a terrible burden, the knowledge of what had caused the sundering. The elves. The dwarfs. The humans who wouldn't arrive for another 1,000 years, but whose coming had been orchestrated by the same powers. They hadn't evolved naturally. They had been created. Engineered by beings from beyond the stars, the Star Makers, as replacement species for the orcs. The sundering hadn't been a natural disaster. It had been genocide. The systematic extermination of the first children of the world to make room for new experiments, new civilizations that would be easier to control. And the Blackfang Clan alone remembered. Thrakmar laughed bitterly as he paced his cave, the knowledge burning in his mind like coals. The other races wrote histories where they were the heroes, the chosen ones, blessed by gods and destiny. Meanwhile, the truth was that they were walking on the bones of the civilization they'd been created to replace. The orcs weren't the monsters in the old stories. They were the victims of the greatest cover-up in the history of the world. But here was the cruel irony. Who would believe him? What elf would accept that their entire civilization was built on genocide? What dwarf would acknowledge that their mountain halls stood where orcish cities once thrived? What human would care about crimes committed before their ancestors were even planted in the world's soil? The secret was worthless. Powerful beyond measure, and completely, utterly worthless. Unless the knock on his cave entrance came during a blizzard so fierce that Thrakmar almost didn't hear it. Almost didn't believe it. No one came to these wastes. No one had come to see him in 2 decades. He grabbed his spear, old habits died hard, and approached the entrance cautiously. Who's there? Someone, who's very cold, and would really appreciate not dying today. The voice was young, female, and shaking with more than just cold. Thrakmar pulled aside the heavy hide covering the entrance. A figure collapsed inward, covered head to toe in snow and ice. He dragged the person inside, his warrior instincts taking over. Get them warm. Remove wet clothes. Check for frostbite. As he worked, he realized his visitor was a half-elf, barely into her 20s. Dark hair plastered to her skull. Lips blue. But alive. Definitely alive, and with the kind of determination in her eyes that suggested she hadn't ended up here by accident. He wrapped her in furs and forced hot broth between her chattering teeth. For an hour, he simply focused on keeping her breathing. It was only after color returned to her face that he allowed himself to ask the obvious question. Why are you here? The half-elf's name was Lyria, and she was a scholar from the Academy of Eversong, 2 months' journey south even in good weather. She'd come seeking the last of the Blackfang Clan. She'd come seeking the truth. They say your people kept the old histories, she said, once she could speak without her teeth clicking together. The real ones. Not the sanitized versions the council allows in the libraries. Thrakmar felt something cold settle in his stomach. And why would an elf care about orc histories? Half-elf, she corrected. My mother was human. And I care, because I've spent 5 years piecing together fragments from archaeological sites across the continent. Fragments that don't match the official histories. Fragments that suggest something terrible happened, something that's been buried and forgotten. She pulled a waterproof satchel from inside her cloak and drew out a journal, its pages covered in meticulous drawings and notes. Thrakmar's hands trembled as he looked at them. Ruins. Pottery shards. Weapons designs. All orcish. All from the time before the sundering. I found these at 17 different sites, Lyria continued. All of them dated to at least 5,000 years ago. All of them showing signs of advanced civilization. But according to every official history, orcs were primitive tribes until about 2,000 years ago. Someone is lying. And I need to know why. Thrakmar stared at this young scholar, who had risked her life to reach him. Who had spent 5 years chasing ghosts of the truth. And he felt something he hadn't felt in 2 decades. Hope. They talked through the night. Thrakmar didn't share the full secret, not yet. He needed to understand this young woman first. Needed to know if she could handle the truth. Lyria told him about her life. The daughter of an elven scholar and a human merchant, she'd never quite fit in either world. Too elven for the humans, too human for the elves. She'd thrown herself into scholarship, into uncovering the past, perhaps hoping to find a place where she belonged in the grand sweep of history. I started finding inconsistencies when I was 16, she explained. References to orcish cities in fragments of text that had been dismissed as mythology. Trade goods showing up in elven settlements that predated when orcs supposedly developed metalworking. It was like someone had gone through all of recorded history with a knife, cutting out anything that didn't fit the narrative. Thrakmar listened, and with each word she spoke, he felt the weight of his secret pressing harder on his chest. This was why his father had endured torture rather than reveal what he knew. This was why 3,000 years of chieftains had carried the burden in silence. Because the truth was dangerous. If the world learned what the Blackfang Clan knew, it would shatter the foundations of every civilization. The elves would face an existential crisis of identity. The dwarfs would question everything they believed about their origins. Humans, already the youngest and most insecure race, would learn they were part of a grand replacement scheme. Wars would be fought. Kingdoms would fall. The fragile peace that existed between the races would explode into violence that could last generations. And yet, keeping the secret meant letting the greatest crime in history remain unpunished. Meant letting the orcs remain as monsters in the stories. Meant allowing a lie to define reality for all time. Thrakmar walked to the back of his cave where the names of his clan were carved in ice. He touched his father's name with one gentle claw. "Father," he whispered, "what would you have me do?" But the ice held only silence. 3 days passed. Lyria recovered her strength while Thrakmar wrestled with the choice before him. They talked about history, about truth, about the responsibility that comes with knowledge. On the 4th night, Thrakmar made his decision. "The Blackfang Clan is dead," he said quietly. "I'm the last. And when I die, the secret dies with me, unless I choose to pass it on." Lyria leaned forward. "What secret?" "The complete and true history of the world. Not fragments. Not hints. The whole terrible truth." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "But if I give this to you, your life will never be the same. You'll carry a burden that destroyed my entire clan. Are you prepared for that?" Without hesitation, Lyria nodded. "I've spent 5 years looking for the truth. I'm not going to turn away from it now." Thrakmar explained the Bloodwhisper ritual. How it would connect their minds completely for a brief time. How it would transfer not just knowledge, but the memories and emotions of everyone who had carried the secret before. 3,000 years of accumulated consciousness would flow into her in less than a minute. "It will hurt," he warned. "It may break you. Are you certain?" Lyria extended her hand. "I'm certain." The ritual was simple in execution, profound in effect. Thrakmar clasped Lyria's hand and spoke the ancient words his father had spoken to him, and his grandfather had spoken to his father, stretching back 150 generations. The connection opened like a floodgate. Lyria screamed as 3,000 years of knowledge slammed into her mind. She saw the great orcish cities in their glory. Saw the libraries filled with wisdom. Saw the moment when the star makers came, beings of cold light and colder purpose. Saw the sundering, the apocalypse that had been engineered with mathematical precision. Saw the first orcs stumbling through the ruins, their culture shattered, their people reduced to scattered tribes. She saw the Blackfang chieftains, generation after generation, carrying the terrible weight. Saw them hunted. Saw them killed. Saw Thrakmar's father bleeding out in the snow, choosing to pass the secret on rather than let it die. And she understood. When the Bloodwhisper finally released them, Lyria collapsed, tears streaming down her face. Not from pain, though there had been pain, but from the sheer magnitude of the injustice. They erased you, she whispered. They erased an entire civilization, and made everyone believe it never existed. Thrakmar nodded slowly. Now you know. Now you carry what the Blackfang clan has carried for 3,000 years. What will you do with it? Lyria stayed with Thrakmar through the winter, and as the snow gradually melted into spring, they made a plan. The truth couldn't be revealed all at once, that would cause exactly the chaos the Blackfang chieftains had feared. But it couldn't stay buried forever either. That would make the sacrifice of Thrakmar's clan meaningless. Instead, they would do what Lyria did best, scholarly work. They would publish papers, catalogue findings, present evidence piece by piece, building an undeniable case through academic rigor. It would take years, perhaps decades, but slowly, carefully, the true history of the world would emerge from the shadows. We'll let people discover it themselves, Lyria said. We'll provide the evidence and let scholars debate, question, and eventually accept the truth. It won't be a revelation. It'll be an evolution of understanding. Thrakmar smiled for the first time in 20 years. My father would have appreciated that approach. Subtle, patient, and far less likely to get us killed. But there was more to do than just academic papers. The Blackfang clan had known something else, something Thrakmar hadn't yet shared with Lyria. The location of the last Orcish archive, a vast underground library that had survived the Sundering, sealed and hidden for 5,000 years. The chieftains had protected that location above all else, because if the Star Makers or their servants ever found it, the evidence would be destroyed forever. But now, with Lyria to help, with allies who could be trusted, perhaps it was time to unseal the archive. To let the old world speak for itself. There's one more thing, Thrakmar said. One more secret I haven't told you. The Blackfang clan weren't just historians. We were guardians. Guardians of proof. He told her about the archive. Lyria's eyes went wide. We could change everything, she breathed. With actual artifacts, actual texts from before the Sundering. We could give the orcs back their history, Thrakmar finished. We could show the world who they really were. Spring turned to summer, and Lyria eventually had to return south. But she wasn't leaving alone. Thrakmar packed up his cave, said goodbye to the ice-carved names of his clan, and joined her. He was the last of the Blackfang clan. But he didn't have to be the last keeper of the secret. Lyria had proven that the knowledge could be shared, could be trusted to those who sought truth rather than power. On their last night in the frozen wastes, Thrakmar performed one final ritual. He carved his own name in the ice next to his father's. But below it, he carved something new, Lyria Silverleaf, first student of the renewed Blackfang. You're starting a new clan, Lyria observed. Not a clan, Thrakmar corrected. A tradition. A school of thought. Anyone who seeks the truth, anyone who's willing to bear the responsibility of knowledge, can join. Orc, elf, human, dwarf, it doesn't matter. The Blackfang weren't just keepers of Orcish history. They were keepers of all history, of true history. As they walked away from the cave, heading south toward civilization and all its complexities, Thrakmar felt something he hadn't experienced since before the purge. Purpose. He was still the last orc of the Blackfang clan. That would never change. But he was no longer alone in carrying the burden. The secret he had been born carrying, the knowledge that had weighed on him like chains for 20 years, was no longer just his to bear. It was shared. And in sharing it, he had transformed it from a burden into a mission. The orcs would have their history back. The truth would emerge. And the Blackfang clan, though dead, would achieve their greatest victory, making sure the past was never forgotten again. Some secrets are meant to die with their keepers. But others are meant to survive, to be passed on, to change the world. Thrakmar had spent 20 years believing his secret was the former. Now, walking side by side with Lyria toward an uncertain future, he finally understood it was the latter. He was the last orc of a forgotten clan. But his story, and the story of his people, was only just beginning. The weight of secrets can destroy us. Or it can define us. It all depends on what we choose to do with them. Thrakmar chose to share his burden. To trust. To hope that truth, however painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. And in making that choice, the last keeper of a dying clan became the first teacher of a new tradition. Sometimes, the end of one story is really the beginning of another.